In a dark cave hidden in the mountains, two sisters made a decision that would shock the world for thousands of years. They looked at their father, an old man named Lot, and they said to each other,
"We have to go now.
"Our father is old,
This is our
and there is
only
no man on
chance.
earth to come into us.
I can't.
Let us
I'm
make
too
our father drink
scared."
wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring through our father." What happened next is one of the most controversial stories in the entire Bible. But before you judge them, you need to understand what led to this moment, because sometimes desperation makes people do the unthinkable. But here's what makes this story even more disturbing. This wasn't a moment of passion or confusion. This was calculated, planned, executed over 2 nights. And if you think you know how this story ends, think again. So before you click away, let me take you back to where it all began, because the context changes everything. Lot wasn't always living in a cave. Just days before, he had been a respected man living in the city of Sodom. But Sodom was a city drowning in wickedness, and God had decided its time was up. Angels came to warn Lot. "Get out, take your family and run. Don't look back." His wife didn't listen. She looked back at the burning city and turned into a pillar of salt. Just like that, the girls lost their mother. Can you imagine? One moment she's there, the next she's gone, frozen in disobedience. Now it was just Lot and his 2 daughters, running for their lives as fire and brimstone rained from the sky behind them. The screams of the dying filled the air. The smell of sulfur choked their lungs. Everything they had ever known was being erased from existence. They found refuge in a cave in the mountains near a small town called Zoar. It was cold. It was isolated. It was silent except for the wind howling through the rocks. And in that silence, fear began to whisper. The older daughter spoke first one evening as they sat by the fire. Her voice was barely above a, "Sister, look around us. Father is getting old. Every day he grows weaker, and we are alone." The younger sister stared into the flames. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we watched the world burn. We watched Mother die. We watched everyone we ever knew turn to ash. What if we're all that's left? What if there are no other men out there?" The younger sister's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Surely somewhere—" "Is it impossible?" The older sister interrupted, her voice rising with intensity. "We fled from a city God himself destroyed. We saw his judgment with our own eyes. What if his judgment swept the whole earth? What if we are the last?" If you're finding this story as shocking as I did when I first studied it, hit that subscribe button because we dive deep into the most controversial and misunderstood Bible stories on this channel. The thought haunted them both. In ancient times, having children wasn't just about family. It was about survival. It was about legacy. It was about ensuring your line didn't disappear from the earth. And these women, raised in a culture that valued offspring above almost everything else, faced a terrifying possibility: extinction. The older sister's mind was working, calculating. "Our father is old, and there is no man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth." "What are you suggesting?" the younger sister asked, though somewhere deep down she already knew. "We must preserve our family. We must ensure that our father's line continues. There is only one way." "No," the younger sister said, shaking her head. We can't." "Can't we?" The older sister grabbed her arm. "Would you rather we all die here and be forgotten? Would you rather our father's name be erased forever?" This is survival. This is what must be done. The next day, they began their plan. They found wine. Perhaps they had brought it with them. Perhaps Lot had stored it. They brought it to their father as the sun set, pouring cup after cup. "Drink, father," the older daughter said softly. "You've been through so much. Rest. Drink and forget for a while." Lot drank. He drank because he was grieving. He drank because he had lost everything. He drank because the wine helped numb the pain of watching his world collapse. He drank until his eyes grew heavy and his words slurred, and he could no longer tell what was happening around him. That night, the older daughter made her choice. She went to her father. The text says, "He did not know when she lay down or when she arose." In his drunken stupor, Lot was unaware of what was happening, unaware of the line being crossed, unaware that his own daughter was using his body to conceive a child. When morning came, she returned to her sister. Her face was set like stone. "It is done." The younger sister looked at her in horror and awe. "What have you done?" "What had to be done. And tonight, it's your turn." "My turn? Sister, I can't—" "Yes, you can. You must. This only works if we both conceive. One child isn't enough to rebuild a family. We need two. We need to ensure our father's seed continues through both of us." Drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think the daughters were heroes trying to save their family line? Or were they wrong? I want to hear your thoughts. The second night unfolded exactly like the first. More wine, more planning, more calculated moves. The younger daughter, steeling herself for what she had agreed to do, went to her father as he lay in his drunken sleep. Again, the text tells us, "He did not know when she lay down or when she arose." 2 nights, 2 daughters, 2 acts that would echo through history. The weeks passed, then months, and both sisters realized the truth. They were pregnant. Their plan had worked, but at what cost? When their time came, each daughter gave birth to a son. The older daughter named her son Moab, which means "from father." She didn't hide the truth of his origin. His very name proclaimed it. The younger daughter named her son Ben-Ammi, meaning "son of my people." These 2 boys would grow up to become the fathers of 2 nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites. And here's where the story gets even more complex. These 2 nations would become thorns in the side of Israel for generations. They would be enemies. They would be obstacles. They would be reminders of this night in the cave. But wait, there's something else you need to know about Lot. This wasn't the first time his daughters had been involved in something disturbing. Remember back in Sodom? When the men of the city surrounded Lot's house, demanding he send out his angel visitors so they could assault them. Lot's solution was to offer his own daughters to the mob instead. He said, "I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please." His own daughters. He was willing to throw them to the wolves to protect his guests. Is it any wonder that these same daughters, having been taught that their bodies were bargaining chips, would use their bodies in this way for what they believed was survival? The question that has haunted scholars and believers for thousands of years is this: were the daughters victims or villains? Were they heroes trying to preserve humanity, or were they committing an unspeakable sin? Some say they were products of Sodom's corrupt culture, where boundaries had been so twisted that even this seemed reasonable. Some say they were desperate women making an impossible choice in impossible circumstances. Some say they were manipulative and evil, taking advantage of their father's weakness. Smash that like button if this story is making you think differently about Bible narratives. But here's what we know for certain. This story was preserved in Scripture not as an example to follow, but as a window into the brokenness of humanity. It shows us how trauma, isolation, and fear can lead people to cross lines they never thought they'd cross. It shows us how cultural beliefs about survival and legacy can override moral boundaries. It shows us that even in the most sacred text, we find stories that make us uncomfortable because they're real. The Bible doesn't shy away from the darkness. It doesn't pretend that God's people were always righteous. It shows us Lot, a man who was called righteous, yet made terrible decisions. It shows us his daughters, women who took matters into their own hands in the most disturbing way possible. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the lesson isn't about whether the daughters were right or wrong. Maybe the lesson is about what happens when we lose sight of God's provision, when we take control instead of trusting, when we let fear drive us to do things we never imagined. Those two nations born from that cave, Moab and Ammon, they became enemies of God's people. But here's the beautiful twist. Ruth, one of the most beloved women in the entire Bible, was a Moabite. She came from the line of Moab, the son born from that desperate night. And Ruth became the great-grandmother of King David, which means she's in the direct lineage of Jesus Christ himself. God took something born from darkness and wove it into his story of redemption. That's what he does. He takes our mistakes, our desperate choices, our moments of weakness, and somehow, he creates beauty from ashes. So what do we take away from this shocking story? Maybe it's this. We are all capable of desperate acts when we feel alone and afraid. We are all capable of justifying the unjustifiable when we think survival is at stake. But God's grace is bigger than our worst moments. His plan continues even through our failures. If this video opened your eyes to a Bible story you never fully understood, subscribe to the Bible Narrator for more deep dives into Scripture.